My husband's estate of $80 million as well as this house will be passed down to me. We don't have any children, so everything is mine. My sister-in-law speaks with such triumph. And my name is Emma, a 45-year-old part-time worker. My husband and I have two sons, a senior and a sophomore in high school. My eldest son is taking the college entrance exam this year. He aspires to be a lawyer and has been studying diligently. He has wanted to be a lawyer since he was a small child, possibly influenced by my older brother Oliver. My brother is a lawyer, and about a few years ago, he established a law firm and even had a few lawyers. My eldest son, who had grown up watching my brother do this, loved to study and always got good grades, even in elementary school. When my brother had heard that my eldest son wanted to be a lawyer, he was overjoyed and encouraged him. My eldest son told my brother whenever they meet, "I will be a lawyer like you, uncle." My brother chuckled as he responded, "Hurry up and become a lawyer and follow in my footsteps." When my brother, who was married but had no children, came to visit us, he gladly plays with my sons and spoils them. My brother's wife was 10 years younger than him. She was an eccentric, or rather a difficult woman who never visited our house, so we never really spoke to her. My brother and I lost our parents when we were young. So when I was about to get married, my brother took place as a parent, and after I married, he married as well. My husband and I were relieved when we knew that my brother was planning to marry a young woman. But when we actually met his fiancée, I was surprised at how grumpy she looked. We were expecting a happy faces because she was about to marry my brother, but she looked at us with a sulky look. I said, "You two are great together," in front of my brother and his fiancée, but I told my true feelings when I returned home and was alone with my husband. I was curious as to why she appeared so unhappy after the marriage was finalized. My husband seemed to agree with me and responded concernedly, "She wasn't a particularly pleasant bride." It can't be helped what we care. My brother married his 10-year younger fiancée. Shortly before they got married, my brother bought a house, so my husband and I took our children and visited them to celebrate. The house was magnificent and astonished me, as expected of my brother because he runs a law firm. But we did not see my sister-in-law, so my husband jokingly said to my brother, "Has your wife already left you?" My husband was obviously joking, but seeing my brother's stern expression, my husband and I became nervous. According to my brother, whenever there is something, sister-in-law returns to her parents' house. Today was their mother's birthday, so she is staying over to celebrate. My husband's shoulders slumped, thinking he had said a bad joke. Suddenly, my brother asks us with a straight face, "If I ever can't have children, can I adopt one of your children?" I thought my brother was joking, saying something like that, but he looked serious. I couldn't answer his unexpected suggestion, but my husband laughed and replied, "We don't know what the future holds, so let's discuss it when it happens, okay? If you are okay with our children, you are free to adopt whichever you want." My husband didn't seem to take it seriously and dismissed it, but I was concerned about the adoption, and more importantly, that my brother and his wife were not getting along. It wasn't my place to intervene because it was their problem, but I was concerned. After that, when we visit my brother's house, or he come over to our house, it was always just him. My sister-in-law never showed up. My brother also never mentioned her, so I avoided asking him about her. They had been married for more than 10 years, and I have almost been forgotten about her existence. This year, my eldest son was accepted into his dream law school. My brother brought up about adoption again, when he came to our house to celebrate my son. Like I said before, "Would you allow me to adopt either of your kids?" he asked. My brother and his wife were unable to have children, and so he asked the question once more. They had just gotten married the last time we discussed it, so there was no sense of hurry, but this time my brother seemed serious. Nonetheless, my husband appeared to take it lightly and responded quickly, "Would you prefer to have our eldest son since he aspires to be a lawyer?" My husband said it so simply, but I was cautious, because it is a major life-changing decision for our sons. Though they were going to be adopted, they would be with my brother. It is their uncle, so my sons would be fine, but I was worried about my sister-in-law. I was concerned that she would mistreat my son, who were not her biological child, so I asked my brother, "Is your wife in favor of adopting?" My brother replied with a sour smile, "Don't worry about her. We've already discussed it." I was relieved to hear that they had already discussed it. But I couldn't make up my mind right away, so I decided to discuss it with my two sons and then make a decision. They are already in high school, so I wanted them to make their own decisions. We didn't go any further that day, but a few days later, I got a call from my brother's lawyer's office. They said he had collapsed. I rushed into the hospital. I found the staffs from the law firm waiting for him with worried expressions. My brother had a stroke at work and was rendered unconscious. After I arrived, the law firm staff left. They also said that they couldn't reach my sister-in-law. I called the landline, but she didn't answer, and I didn't have her cell phone number. My husband and my second son later arrived, but I really couldn't reach my sister-in-law. My second son eventually discovered a smartphone among my brother's belongings. We unlocked it and began looking up for her number. She answered angrily when I called using that phone. "I told you not to call again. I will sue you." I began to speak while she was yelling in a terrible tone. "It's Emma, Oliver's sister. My brother passed out and was taken to the hospital." Then she started talking gently when she realized it's me on the phone. "I'm so sorry. I thought it was Oliver. You said he collapsed?" I told her about my brother's condition and which hospital he was taken to, but she responded happily. "I can't go to the hospital right now because I have things to do, but please notify me as soon as you hear anything." She then hung up the phone. I wondered if she had more important things to do now, even her husband is sick. Now that we know my sister-in-law cannot be any help, we decided to take care of my brother. Since my eldest son had finished his university entrance exams, and he was relaxing at home most of the time, he visited my brother every day on my behalf. My brother never regained consciousness and remained in critical condition, but my sister-in-law never called nor visited the hospital. About a week after my brother was hospitalized, I called my sister-in-law again. She answered the phone quickly and gleefully. "What's the matter? Did he die?" I wanted to yell at her for being so rude, but I responded quietly. "He is still alive. Why don't you visit the hospital?" She retorted as if she irritates me while I hold back my rage. "I'm not a doctor, nor am I a spiritual healer. There's nothing I can do for his recovery." I became even more enraged by her demeanor, so I hung up the phone. I began to suspect that my brother wanted to adopt one of my sons because he had given up on having children with his wife. I think they weren't getting along. When my brother's marriage was finalized, I asked him how they'd meet, and he said they met through a marriage counseling agency. Maybe my sister-in-law married him because he was a lawyer and she wanted to have a good life. This thought enraged me even more, but when I mentioned it to my husband, he said something even more crueler. If Oliver dies in this situation, his wife will inherit the entire estate, since they don't have any children. So my brother came to celebrate my eldest son the other day and spoke to us about adoption. Maybe it was because he was thinking about his inheritance. I wish I could have decided at that time, but there was nothing I could do. After my brother left that day, I casually mentioned it to my two sons, and my second son told me that he would be happy to be adopted. Unlike my eldest son, my second son has no goals at the moment. He appears to believe that if he is adopted by Oliver, he will have an easy life. I expected the first son, who looks up to his brother, to want to be adopted as well, but the answer surprised me. "I don't want to be adopted, because as the eldest son, I will take care of you, Mom and Dad." I was overjoyed, but I also knew that my eldest son, who aspired to be a lawyer, was the right one to be adopted by. I was disappointed that I can't complete the adoption process on behalf of my unconscious brother. I do not want my brother's inheritance, but I also do not want to give even a penny of his property to my sister-in-law, who appears to be awaiting his death. I could only hope for my brother's recovery, but he never recovered. My brother passed away a few days later, and I had no choice but to contact my sister-in-law. "My brother recently passed away. Can we do a funeral?" My sister-in-law, who had been waiting the news of my brother's death, responded cheerfully. "Everything is up to you. Please do not appoint me as a pallbearer. I don't want to deal with any formalities." "You—" When I was about to lose it, she quickly hung up the phone. After all, my husband and I planned the funeral. Staffs from the law firm helped us in a variety of ways. My husband was also concerned about the firm's future, but my brother had taken care of that. Though my brother was the firm's representative lawyer, he delegated management to someone he trusted, so the law firm as a corporation will continue to operate without a problem. Many people came to my brother's funeral, and so many wreaths were brought that they couldn't fit it in the hall. Then I realized how wonderful my brother was once again. My son also assisted at the funeral, but when my second son saw the presidents of major corporations, politicians, and others had also attended, he was really frustrated. I knew I should have been adopted. I had no idea how amazing he was. My husband and I both felt we could kind of understand his sorrow. I was the pallbearer, but no one asked why my sister-in-law wasn't there, and no one mentioned it. I wondered if we were the only ones who knew my brother had married. My brother and his wife did not have a wedding. Instead, they only went on their honeymoon, so even the relatives may have missed it. If this was going to happen, I almost wish they had never married. No need of a wife who does not attend of her husband's funeral, and I regret not allowing him to adopt my second son sooner, because I believe she would take all of my brother's estates. With the help of the law firm staffs, my brother's funeral was completed. I invited everyone to my brother's house for a meal and to thank them. My brother will be able to rest in peace because of all of you. We were all very sad. That's when my sister-in-law appeared, wearing a flashy pink coat. I addressed her as if she had planned to arrive just as the funeral wrapped up. "After all this time, why did you come here?" With a big smile on her face, she speaks loud so that everyone could hear. "My husband's estate of $80 million, as well as this house, will be passed down to me, his wife. We don't have any children, so everything is mine." For some reason, when she said it triumphantly, my brother's subordinates burst out laughing. We looked at them confused, unsure why they were laughing. My sister-in-law glared and yelled at them. "What exactly are you laughing about? You're so impolite." While smirking, one of the lawyers responded, "We know that you're officially divorced. We all knew the result of your divorce settlement the day before he collapsed." When I first heard this fact, I exclaimed, "What? You were divorced?" I looked over my sister-in-law's face and saw her staring at them, who had just said the truth with the most terrifying expression ever. When she clenched her teeth, the other lawyer started talking. "I also heard that you were charged alimony in conjunction with your divorce. Because your affair caused a divorce, it is inevitable." My sister-in-law yelled, glaring at the lawyer who said it. "I'm not required to pay alimony, am I? I no longer have anyone to pay." She spoke mockingly, but there was no way she could compete with a legal expert, and she was quickly retorted, "The right to alimony will also be inherited, so you will have to pay it to Emma. She's the inheritor." Then I realized for the first time that I was my brother's sole inheritor. If their divorcement was finalized and our parents are gone, so I'm all that's left. She seemed to realize this too, and looked at me with a horrified expression, causing me to step back. But she seems unconvinced and began yelling once more. "Don't I get half of the estate now that divorcement is settled?" A dismayed-looking lawyer responds, "Didn't Oliver give you money when the divorce was finalized? I have a receipt certificate." He also purchased the house before the marriage, so it is not the subject of property division. I enjoyed watching her being lectured by the lawyers regardless of what she said. She seemed to recall something and shouted while laughing a little, "There's the life insurance, I should still be the beneficiary." She impressed me with her attitude in a situation where everyone around appeared to be her enemy. She said she changed the beneficiary of Oliver's life insurance to herself. However, the lawyer was also quick to deny about the life insurance. Oliver is a firm man, so I think he changed it when the divorce was finalized. I searched my brother's valuables and discovered the life insurance policy. When my sister-in-law saw this, she took the life insurance policy from me and looked impatiently at the beneficiary, but dropped her shoulders in disappointment. When she returned the certificate to me, I noticed that the beneficiary was me. My sister-in-law, realizing she was getting nowhere, yelled out her true feelings without thinking. "I married a lawyer because I thought he is wealthy, but I've only got a little money. In addition, I have to pay alimony. This is a huge mistake." With a grimace, the lawyer replied to her. Oliver said same thing. He said he shouldn't have come for the advice of a marriage counselor. He bemoaned the fact that he had made a huge mistake. My brother had never said anything like that to me, but he had always been truthful with his coworkers and subordinates. Unable to refute anything, my sister-in-law rolled her back and left my brother's house. Later on, she will have to pay the alimony in installments, but she didn't have a job. She began looking for a job quickly, but she has never worked seriously before and quit immediately. She re-registered to the marriage counseling agency and looked for a wealthy man in order to make quick money. And she found a wealthy man, told him she needed money for marriage, and cheated him out of his money. But the man caught on right away and reported her to the police. She was arrested for marriage fraud, according to the lawyer who works in my brother's law firm. To be honest, no alimony was ever paid to me, and when I went to see the lawyer about it, the story came up. In dismay, the lawyer told me, now that she has been apprehended, alimony payments may be impossible to obtain for the foreseeable future. Alimony is not something I am interested in. I was more interested in seeing her suffer a terrible fate. I believe my brother would agree, so I would like the police to investigate thoroughly her other crimes, etc., and charge her as a felon in court. My family moved into a house that my brother had left behind after unexpectedly inheriting his property. My husband and sons were ecstatic to be able to live in a big house after previously living in an apartment. My eldest son is studying law harder than ever before. He observed his brother's colleagues and subordinate lawyers arguing with his sister-in-law, which made him yearn to be a lawyer. Though he was never adopted by, I hope he will carry on my brother's legacy and become a great lawyer like him. Only my second son is upset and disappointed that I inherited my brother's entire estate. He claims, "To be honest, I wish I was adopted by uncle so I could have inherited everything." The second son smiled, half-jokingly.
"Dad! What are you doing here?" I couldn't help but shout. Because there was Dad, in the yard under the blazing sun. He was lying in an old tent that had become worn, just like the ones I saw in my childhood. Don't worry about it. It's the usual thing." Dad's weak reply made me speechless. Since he had injured his leg, he has been living with my brother and his wife. My brother always said Dad was doing fine whenever I called, and his wife always chuckled, saying she was supporting him properly. I was told that the reason I couldn't get in touch with Dad himself was because he was not good with texts and he had made new friends at the hospital, leading a fulfilling life. Seeing Dad lying there listlessly, I keenly felt that my brother and his wife's words were a lie. Dad slowly raised his hand to me and pointed in a certain direction. And there was. I am single, and my parents' house is in the city, but I moved away from home to live alone in the countryside to fulfill my dream of working at a resort hotel. My parents living at home had a traffic accident 2 years ago, and only Mom passed away. Dad injured his leg in that accident. Not only that, but he also got deeply depressed after losing Mom. Dad and Mom were always together and were known as a loving couple in the neighborhood. Dad was quite an indoor person, but he used to travel regularly for Mom, who loved traveling. On the way back from one of these trips, my parents had an accident, and only Dad survived. Why did I survive instead of her? He was filled with deep remorse every day. The injury made Dad, who preferred staying indoors, spend even more time at home. Since I was working, there was only so much time I could spend for home care. Seeing Dad so down made me feel terrible, but fortunately, I have a brother who is 7 years older than me. My brother Anthony and his wife Mia, living close to our parents' home, occasionally checked in on us. Dad's gotten a lot weaker, hasn't he? When I said that. They were a loving couple, after all. It's understandable. We live nearby, so Emma, don't worry and focus on your work. Anthony replied. Thank you. When I thanked him. Recently, I've been directly hit by the recession, and my income has decreased significantly. I need to start saving soon. How about you, Emma? He said with a sigh. I'm actually doing pretty well, thanks to tourists coming back from abroad. I have been really busy lately, unlike my brother. The overtime pay compensated for it, so I haven't been struggling financially. In fact, I've had a raise and I think I'm earning more than most of my peers. However, not having private time has been tough. It was the first time my brother had lamented about his financial situation. According to him, they've had to cut back on food expenses and are barely making it through each day. He hasn't bought clothes in over a year, and of course, they haven't been on any trips either. He said they wanted children, but the two of them were barely managing as is, so having children was out of the question. I was worried they must be really struggling, then Anthony mentioned during a conversation at his house. Dad's leg has gotten much worse, and he needs some support. We're thinking about living together so we can take care of him. Followed by Mia. We were talking about how it would save us money and we could take care of Dad at the same time. I appreciate it. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I thanked them on the spot. Thank you, Emma. Good luck with your work. Mia also seemed happy. Thus, to save money and take care of Dad, my brother and his wife decided to live with Dad. The relationship between Dad and my brother wasn't that great to begin with. My brother used to come home in the morning and was often scolded by Dad back when he was a student. Gradually, they stopped talking much, and after graduating from college, Anthony hardly ever came home. I had hardly seen Dad and Anthony talking since he became an adult. So, it was surprising that Anthony was being positive about living with Dad. It was easy to imagine they were really struggling financially. The appeal of saving on rent and living expenses was totally understandable, especially for someone living alone like me. However, I honestly felt anxious about whether they would truly take proper care of him. Since I couldn't go back home often due to work, I regularly called Anthony instead. "Hey, Anthony, how's Dad doing?" He started to smile a bit more these days. "Isn't caregiving tough?" "I'm sorry to leave it all to you. It's been 3 months now and I think we've gotten quite used to us living together." Initially, I felt anxious, but it seemed that my brother and his wife were dedicated to support Dad, so I could focus on my work with peace of mind. Several years have passed, and after the summer vacation ended, I decided to visit my hometown for the first time in a while. I called Anthony to avoid surprising them with my sudden return. "Hey, Anthony! It's been a while." "Oh, it has been. How are you? Think you'll be able to come home this year?" I was relieved to hear his cheerful voice. "Yeah, the busy period has finally calmed down, so I'm thinking of coming home for 2 or 3 days." "That's good to hear. Be careful on your way back." "Thanks, please let Dad and Mia know too." I tried to call Dad as well, but couldn't get through, so I informed Anthony and then went home for the first time in years. It was the first time I hadn't been back home for so many years. Since Mom passed away, I was worried about Dad and tried to visit home as much as possible during my holidays. But I felt reassured because Anthony and Mia were living with him and I had been too busy to visit for several years. The family home in the city felt hotter than where I live. I finally arrived at the family home, sweating and wondering for how long the intense heat would continue. Then, I saw an old tent in the front yard that I didn't recognize. Was there such a tent? Wondering what it was, I approached the tent and felt someone's presence, so I hurried into the family home. "I'm back." "Welcome back, Emma. You look pale, what happened?" Mia looked surprised to see my pale face. "I think there's someone in the tent." I hastily reported about the tent to Mia, who welcomed me back. Then, she gave an unexpected reply. "Ah, that's Dad." My brother's wife answered calmly. "What? Dad is in the tent on such a hot day?" I rushed to check inside the tent. Inside, Dad was lying down as if he had collapsed. "Mia! I'm calling an ambulance. Dad is fatigued," I said, and then, "No need to call an ambulance," Mia shouted at me. "It's Dad's wish to live in the garden. So there's nothing to worry about." She said something incomprehensible. Dad is fatigued on such a hot day and still claims to want to live in the garden? That extreme indoor person would say such thing? I don't remember being taken to camping or to beaches even when Mom was doing great and healthy. Dad used to say the best place to stay in summer is in chilled room and the heated room in winter. There's no way Dad would want to spend time outside on such a hot day. I felt that something was off, an unpleasant premonition came over me. I hurried over to the tent where Dad was and spoke to him. "Dad, what happened? Are you okay?" "Emma? It's nothing, just the usual, I'm fine," Dad said in a weakened voice. "Do you live in this fiery place every day? Won't you come inside?" When I asked Dad that, he slowly pointed towards the main house. There was Dad's room. "Actually, since living with Anthony and the others, I've been forced to live in the closet." Dad revealed the shocking truth. "In the closet? I thought they were dedicatedly taking care of you." "Not once have they taken care of me dedicatedly. Their living together is only for their own savings. I've repeatedly told them I hate the closet because my leg hurts. Then they said if I complain, live outside, and that's why I was thrown out in the garden with an old tent during this still hot period." Dad continued with a story I wished I could shut my ears to. It was clear that my brother and Dad could not get along. I blamed myself for trusting Anthony. Mia was not the type to dedicatedly support someone either. I remembered how Anthony used to complain about her going out drinking and coming home wasted early in the morning. This couple, who said they ate out 365 days a year and never cooked for themselves, clearly weren't cut out for taking care of Dad. Yet, I was foolish enough to have expectations. This is not okay. I've got you now that I'm here. It was shocking to discover how terribly they had been treating Dad. Despite their claims of dedicated care over the phone, they had actually forced Dad to live in a closet and then thrown him out into the yard. Unforgivable. Anger welled up inside me. Ignoring Mia's pleas, I called an ambulance. I said, there's no need to call an ambulance. Don't make such a big deal out of it. My brother's wife desperately tried to stop me. But I continued to ignore her words. When the ambulance arrived, they took Dad, and I went along. Dad was on the verge of heatstroke, but fortunately, it was not life-threatening. However, he was hospitalized because he hadn't been given proper meals and was left in an unhygienic environment. Dad, rest easy and take your time to recover. Then he replied, Emma, you're my lifesaver. I was prepared to join your mom every day. He looked relieved. What are you talking about? We need you to live much longer. Realizing Dad had been living each day as if it were his last, I felt tears welling up. But I kept a smile on my face in front of him. I went back to the family home to collect some things for Dad's hospital stay. Anthony, Mia, you need to explain yourselves about Dad. I confronted my brother and his wife with my anger about how Dad had been treated. We were just acting cold, hoping Dad would leave on his own. Mia confessed nonchalantly. Yeah, surprisingly, he was stubborn and wouldn't leave. Anthony said it as if it was nothing. They seemed to be aware that they had been cruel to Dad. They laughed while talking about their attempts to drive him out. Do you even hear what you're saying? It's good that he's alive, but if something had happened to Dad, you'd both be criminals. You're over-exaggerating. We did feed him, and checked if he was alive once a day. He spoke as if they were dealing with an animal. He's being hospitalized because he wasn't fed properly. What do you think Dad is? It's absurd to kick him out of his own house. My brother and his wife showed no sign of remorse and began making excuses. We didn't want to live here out of choice. We moved in because we were struggling financially, but caregiving turned out to be harder than expected. Then Mia added, That's why we tried to put him in a facility. But Dad really hates the idea of leaving this house filled with memories of his wife. He even tried to kick us out. They appealed to me, victimizing themselves. Struggling with the caregiving, they attempted to make Dad leave, but instead, they were the ones nearly driven out and tried to make him want to leave on his own. Having free rent is a big deal for poor people, so we couldn't just let him kick us out. Anthony said. I never thought my brother would stoop so low as to deliberately worsen Dad's care and quality of life just to monopolize the house. Although Dad and my brother weren't that close, I believed, as an adult in his mid-30s, he would manage well with Dad. It was frightening that they could come up with such a vile strategy. Moreover, my brother confessed that by locking Dad in the closet or throwing him out into the yard when I was visiting, they were trying to make Dad choose to live with me instead. Living in the countryside is better for his health anyway. So, we were fully planning to send him to live with you. My brother said, and then. Wasn't he surprisingly stubborn? We thought he'd run away before you arrived, but he endured. Mia laughed as if they were sharing tales of past hardships. Now that you are back, Dad will probably say he wants to live with you. Anthony laughed saying this. Then, he said something outrageous. Now that Dad's been sent to the hospital, this house is ours, so pack your things and leave. I was so appalled by his audacity that I was at a loss for words. To think he could say such a thing while living in someone else's house. I gathered Dad's belongings and went back to the hospital. Dad, I heard about what happened from my brother. It must have been tough. When I spoke to Dad, trying to drive them out of the house backfired on me. That house is a treasure filled with memories of Mom. I couldn't just hand it over to such people. Dad's love for Mom kept him going still, which felt reassuring. Don't worry about the house, we'll figure something out. The hospital stay might continue for a bit, but would you like to live with me after you're discharged? When I suggested this. Thank you. If you are okay with it, I'd be happy to live together. Dad seemed pleased. After getting Dad's consent to live together, I went back to my place. 2 months later, I received a barrage of calls from Anthony. There are a bunch of unknown men in the house. What's going on? Although Anthony was furiously demanding answers, I simply handed the phone to someone else without replying. The person who took over the phone was our maternal grandfather. Hey, Anthony. I've heard the story from Emma. You've done something terrible to my dear son-in-law. When grandfather spoke. Grandpa! Anthony sounded shocked. Our family home was actually built by our grandfather as a wedding gift for Mom when she was young. Dad was adopted into the family, and grandfather always doted on Dad as if he were his own child. And I told grandfather about the situation. He was furious and sent over some of his strongest apprentices to drive out my brother and his wife. After the commotion, I immediately called grandfather, who is the land and house owner. Grandfather has always been imposing, and Anthony has always been afraid of him. I sought his help this time, believing he would be able to do something. Anthony, all your stuff has been arranged to be sent to Mia's parents' house. When grandfather said this, don't just go ahead with things on your own. Anthony resisted, albeit fearfully. A person who treated their family like that has no right to talk back. Got any complaints? Grandfather spoke sternly. No, sir, I'm sorry. Anthony conceded and didn't talk back after that. Grandfather was always kind to me, a woman, but very strict with Anthony. Growing up, if he cried, stop crying and man up. Grandfather would spank him, causing him to cry more and get scolded even further. What was acceptable in the past is now considered taboo. Watching Anthony, I often felt relieved to have been born a girl. Although he had been rebellious towards Dad, he never dared to defy grandfather. This time too, he tried to resist a bit, but grandfather quickly took control, showing my brother couldn't match him. Anthony and Mia's belongings were delivered to Mia's parents' house as grandfather had arranged. Upon arriving at Mia's parents' house. Apparently it had been a long time since they returned there. Hey, Dad, I think our stuff has arrived, so we came to pick it up. When Mia said this, Mia's dad came out from the back room. I've heard everything from Anthony's sister. You guys are going to live with us from now on. Then my brother responded. It's okay. We'll live at my family home. Don't even think about returning after doing such things to your father. I'll straighten out your rotten attitude. Mia's dad was furious. I had heard that Mia's dad was very strict. After explaining everything to her dad, they had no choice but to live all together under strict discipline. Mia was taught to cook from scratch and had to prepare meals for the family every day. Anthony got permission for a side job and helped Mia's dad with his work on weekends. After being discharged, Dad was told by grandfather that the house needed repairs due to damage. Determined to fix the house filled with memories of Mom, Dad committed himself to rehabilitation and recovered impressively. You did great with the rehab. The doctors were even surprised by your quick recovery. When I said that, Dad replied, Of course. It's the house filled with memories of your mom, so I need to put my all into fixing it. He spoke with a brightness in his voice, like in the old days. It seems love for Mom helped Dad recover. With grandfather's instructions and the help of his apprentices, we gradually repaired the house. While repairing the house, Dad seemed to regain the sparkle he had when Mom was alive. You seem really lively. Working on the house brings back a lot of memories, and it feels like I'm talking to your mom. I felt like she had gone far away, but maybe she's been nearby all along, watching over me. Hearing Dad talk like that almost brought tears to my eyes. Despite the horrible treatment from my brother and his wife, perhaps Mom really was protecting him. Eventually, the house repairs were completed. When the repairs were done, Dad decided to let go of the house. Dad, are you sure? I felt like Mom said it's okay not to cling to this house anymore. Plus, now that it's so beautifully done, I really want someone to live in it. He spoke in a calm voice. I see, I think she would be happy too. Thanks to the renovations Dad and the team made, a buyer was quickly found. Thanks to all of this, Dad and Grandfather decided to move into nursing homes. I've started visiting more often. Dad, how are you? I'm having a great time every day. Made a lot of friends too. It's all thanks to you, Emma. Really, thank you. Dad was smiling. Dad seems to enjoy his days with the other residents, making my time spent with him even more precious. And I've been living more peacefully every day. As for Anthony and Mia, we've gotten used to Dad's discipline, and it's quite comfortable this way. Mia said. Yeah, the strictness isn't all the time, and the house is big, it's great. Anthony seemed to be enjoying their lifestyle too. Being freed from caregiving, it's actually lucky for us. Mia was happy. Thanks to this, we're living a good life despite the low income. I feel so grateful. My brother and his wife had adapted to living at Mia's parents' house and were happy to be freed from caregiving, showing no signs of remorse. Then, Mia's dad, furious at their lack of repentance, kicked them out. There's no sign of remorse from you, so you might as well leave. Mia's dad said quietly but angrily. Dad, wait! Pack your things and leave immediately. He expelled them without allowing any discussion. They were accustomed to living at home without saving money. They found themselves without a home and at a loss. Until they could afford the initial costs for a new place, they lived in an old tent in the park during winter. It's freezing! It's because your income is so low that we have to live like this. Mia blamed Anthony. The tent is from home, but I bought you a new sleeping bag, so stop complaining. I've been working 7 days a week without rest. Anthony retorted irritably. With the money from his side job already spent, they had nothing left. How about we contact Emma and ask if we can live with her in the countryside? To this carefree suggestion, I'll try contacting her. Anthony immediately agreed. Soon after, Anthony called to tell me they were kicked out of Mia's parents' house and were now sleeping in a park in the cold. My brother, who once mocked my countryside living, was now begging to live with me. I was unable to bring myself to help someone who treated their own dad so terribly, so of course, I refused. I've decided to block all future communications to avoid any hassle. I can only hope they learn that what goes around comes around.